Get ready to see them punch the paddle. It's the always exciting Team Relay World Cup race to open up the 44th World Cup season on the Eberspecher World Cup Tour. Hi again, everyone. I'm Tim Singer. First relay of the season. We're in Innsbruck, Austria, and as you can see, the weather is not cooperating. Earlier today in the men's competition, it started foggy, women's race rather, and it cleared up a little bit. But now the fog has moved back in from the Tyrolean Valley of Innsbruck. Here's a look at the course. They actually start at the men's and doubles competition, the women's doubles start area, which will actually present a bit of a challenge for the men who have really not trained there at all. And it's an already tricky start corner they'll be facing. Now the way this works is the sled makes its way down, and you'll see another good look. That was the big left-hand turn. Trust me, from what we've seen from the athletes, it's a lot tougher than it looks from this POV sled camera athlete. After they make their way through the Kreisel curve, there's a series of curve 8 and then the always tough left-hand turn to curve 9. Straightaway. You want to ride high off of curve 10, dip down into the lower labyrinth, a series of S turns. Also tough because this is a narrow part of the track. Then it makes its way uphill to the finish. The track record was set here in Eagles at the 2017 World Championships. The Germans, Hufner, Ludwig, and Egert Benneken. 10 teams have qualified to start in the first World Cup race for Team Relay. This is one of the newer disciplines to the sport of World Cup Luge, and it has appeared at the last 2 Olympic Games, both times won by Germany. Germany will be the last to go. They are the defending world champions in Team Relay Luge competition, but they did not win the World Cup overall. For the first time, that went to Italy and Russia, who tied for the victory last year. First up will be the Republic of Korea. And as we get this first team settled in, we'll talk a little bit more about how this format works. But all told, we'd love to have you share in today's live streaming commentary. I'm solo for this race as well, but if you have questions, comments, insights that you want to pass along, you can find us on Twitter at Luge Announcer, and you can also email us at luge.announcer@gmail.com. Hoi-Sun Young on course first. Earlier today, she finished 28th in the season opening women's singles World Cup competition. Last year, Korea finished 13th in the World Cup standings in relay, and then they had a top 10 and 8th place finish at the World Championships. Her best result was a 9th in Lillehammer, Norway. Now, when the first athlete makes their way to the finish, they will see the paddle. They need to hit the paddle cleanly, and that opens up the gate for the next athlete. In this case, it's Namkyu Lim. Namkyu Lim racing for the first time this weekend. He did not qualify for the World Cup field during the Nations Cup on Friday. Exit of 9, not too bad. Again, trying to stay on the sled is the first challenge, but then hitting the paddle is the second. And at least once, on an average of once a week, we will see one team not able to perform this function. But the Koreans set the table pretty nicely for their final sled, Ying-Yong Park and Young-Myung Cho, who finished 20th yesterday at the World Cup race. They also finished 14th last year at the World Championships. Now, from the looks of it, this paddle on the outrun at Eagles is one of the more accessible on the World Cup Tour because the sled is already slowing down on the uphill portion, as well as the fact that it's pretty much a straightaway. On a couple of tracks in the world, Oberhof comes to mind, Segula as well, you turn a corner and the paddle is waiting for you. And you really have to react quickly. You have to steer, then hit it. But it is a little easier to get here. But it's still a tough maneuver to get off that sled and hit the paddle. 2:13.113 is the combined time for the 3 Korean sleds to open up this relay competition. Settling into the sled, a little easier for the women in the doubles because they've each had 2 racing and a couple of training runs off the start ramp. But the men, the second of the 3 sleds for all of the nations you see today, that's going to be the interesting one to watch. Maybe 1 training run at the lower start, but that's it. And it's a tough lower start. This is the second of 3 races on a busy Sunday in Innsbruck, Austria, the 4th out of 5 this weekend in the opening weekend of the World Cup. There you see the next team getting ready at the start, the Czech Republic. And first off will be Anna Šešokova, who did not start in the World Cup race this morning. Last year, Czech Republic was 11th in the World Cup standings in team relay. They did have a top 10 in 9th place at the World Championships. Now this lower start, there is not a lot of warm-up room around where you're seeing right there on the track for the athletes to get ready. So because of the social distancing necessary and required, most of the athletes are all up and down this entire track. A lot of them are warming up probably about 500-600 meters above this start at the men's parking lot area. Well, a big advantage right now for the Czech Republic, a 1/10 of a second up on Korea, which would lead me to believe that Šešokova had a rough day on Friday in the Nations Cup, because she has a big advantage, or did have a big advantage over Korea, but now she seems to be losing that time, and she does fall way behind from the second to split to the last one. She hits the paddle okay, opening the gates for Mikhail Lešek. Lešek also did not qualify for the main race on Friday at the Nations Cup. Nations Cup is a brutal, brutal test of nerves for these athletes trying to get into the main draw on the weekend. Following this day of competition in Eagles, the athletes will all pack up and they'll drive roughly 4 to 5 hours to far eastern Germany, outside of Dresden, to the track in Altenburg, where next week's second World Cup will be held. Hitting the paddle and opening the door for Vedejak and Pekny, the final of the Czech Republic trio of sleds. They finished 18th yesterday in the World Cup opener and were 21st overall last year in the World Cup standings. Non-stop action with this relay competition. This is about, I want to say, the 9th or 10th year on the World Cup, maybe the 11th for the team relay. As I mentioned, it's been at 2 Olympic Games now. It's really become one of the more visually exciting events to watch. As I mentioned, this paddle is not one of the more challenging placements on the track on the World Cup. So we could see all 10 come through cleanly here. It's a second place time right now for the Czech Republic. They're a 1/4 of a second back of Korea following the 3 runs. And the splits can sometimes be tight, even though they're much greater in the time here. And keep in mind, last year, as you take another look at each of these 3 athletes, last year, in the end, the World Cup ended up in an exact tie for first place. Italy and Russia tied. That was in part because Italy fell all the way back into 10th place in that final race. They had been in the top 3 in 4 of the previous 5 races. They ended up 10th, and as a result, they tied Russia for the World Cup overall. Czech Republic down safely. The Republic of Korea still in the lead. Now we turn our attention back to the top in a moment. Be careful to socially distant, guys. Romania. Raluca Strămăturaru will be followed by Valentin Cretu, and then a young doubles team of Honderek and Alanai. And on the left there, Cretu standing up, sent me a photo just a few moments ago that he snapped right here at the start area, looking down and just showing exactly how foggy it is, the athlete's point of view coming off of this ramp. Raluca on course. Negotiates the start pretty well. Earlier today, Strămăturaru with a 22nd place showing. She finished 7th at the Olympic Games in 2018 in what was clearly the hottest streak of her long career. She's been at it for 15 years on the World Cup, and that period in late 2018, the last few World Cups into the Olympic Games, she was regularly finishing in the top 10. The first of the three Romanians. Really clean, emphatic tap of the paddle. And now Valentin Cretu. Disappointing run yesterday for Cretu in the first heat where he crashed. Not a bad crash, but he skidded, came off of the sled briefly down in the lower S curves, and as a result ended up in 31st place. Valley through curve 9 with no problems. Split time coming up. Romania facing off against the Republic of Korea, and nearly a full second up. Can Cretu keep it clean? Down here at the bottom where he had trouble yesterday, yes, although he did kind of waver there at the end in the uphill, but opening up a gigantic advantage, 1.3, setting the stage for the doubles team. Honderek and Alanoy were very impressive yesterday. Their first ever World Cup race, they finished in 17th place, just missing out on another appearance later today in the sprint. Romania ended up in 12th overall last year in the World Cup in team relay, but that was because they were only raced in 2 of the events. Now that they apparently have a doubles team on board, or a couple of them all season long, figure on the Romanians to be a top 8 team. And they cross in 2:11.709, and this young doubles team even extended that lead. So the Koreans showing their sportsmanship and appreciation. They got a little time for some loving down there in the leader's box, but Romania will take over the lead. Raluca Strămăturaru just peeking up as she exits curve 9. And then in the final section here, Cretu, look at that paddle. It's just out there. Is there an easier location in the world? If any of my friends from the USA or Canada are tuning in and watching live, let me know if this is the easiest paddle location at any of the stops. Romania out in front. And speaking of which, with the USA and Canada, let's talk a little bit about the teams that are not here as we get ready for the Ukrainians coming up next. USA, not in today's competition. And the Americans had a couple of podiums to end the World Cup last year in Oberhof and Königssee, not to mention a 3rd place podium finish at the World Championships. Canada had a top 4 here in Eagles last year, and Canada, of course, coming off of an Olympic medal in team relay. They're not here either. And the Polish team, which has done remarkably well over the last few seasons in team relay, they also are not taking part in this weekend's action. At least the doubles team, Chmielewski and Kowalewski, are not here. And as a result, there is no Polish relay team. But now we set our sights on the Ukrainians. Olena Shmaha, first to go. Earlier today, she finished 27th in the World Cup women's singles event. And last year, the Ukraine was 8th overall in the team relay, and they were one of only 4 nations, or 5 nations, to complete every World Cup race in team relay. So attendance matters when you're trying to garner the World Cup points. It matters a lot. Shmaha up the outrun. You slow down quite a bit as you make your way up there. And now it's Anton Dukash. Dukash went off early to start the season yesterday and ended up in 21st place in the race, one of his better results over the last couple of years. You saw he had a little bit of a problem on that straightaway just after the start curve entering the Kreisel. He had to correct with the steering. Let's see how much that might hurt him down here. He's a 1/4 of a second up at the last split. And let's see how he hits that paddle coming up around the S curves. No, it's right about the same. He stopped the bleeding, as they sometimes say. So a 1/4 of a second advantage to Stakov and Lisetsky, who yesterday had an impressive 15th place finish in the doubles event. As a result, they'll be the first sled to go later today in the sprint competition. They've lost half of that lead. This is going to be very close. Ukraine against Romania. In effect, it's Stakov and Lisetsky against Honderek and Alanoy. Now they've opened it up a little more. So it's looking a little more comfortable for Ukraine. The 4th nation out of 10 in today's race, and oh, so close. Just 0.05 of a second after 2 minutes and 11 seconds of sliding. How about that for how tight these split times can be? So Ukraine takes the lead over Romania. That's a guaranteed top 7 finish for Ukraine, who finished last season with a pair of 6th place results. Well, they've done a great job to stage all of these races, 5 of them here in Eagles, and that's a credit to Christoph Speiger, the executive director of the International Luge Federation, who is acting as the FIL hygiene officer, really the policeman to make sure things stay healthy with the COVID pandemic. And our thanks also to the newest president of the FIL, Einars Fogielis from Latvia. I'm not sure if Einars is on hand here this week. I haven't seen him, but of course, people are hiding out of the way. There aren't big crowds of people gathering at the finish. Ukraine into the lead, and now getting ready up at the top on this humid, foggy day is the team from Slovakia. Getting ready to go, Katarina Simonakova. Slovakia last year finished in 6th place in both the World Cup overall as well as the World Championships in Sochi, Russia. In fact, they had top 5 finishes in each of the last 2 races. 5th place in Winterberg, 5th place in Königssee in team relay. Among their best ever. Simonakova, top 20 earlier today, 19th place in the World Cup race. Fog still moving in as she exits the Kreisel cleanly with a 0.06 of a second advantage over Olena Shmaha of the Ukraine. ...107 kilometers an hour. That's 66.5 miles per hour. Tapping that paddle with just a 0.09 of a second lead over Ukraine. Now here's Josef Ninnis. Ninnis, 28th place yesterday in the Eagles race. Finished 12th last year at the World Championships. And as I mentioned, Josef is probably having the best period of his long career. He's been on the World Cup since 2004, and his best seasons have been the last 3. Ninnis opening up that lead now. Could be as much as 0.2 of a second if he keeps it clean here on the outrun. Now just hold steady at 1/10. The advantage, Slovakia over Ukraine. And a little bit of an adventure there with both feet down after that start curve. They get it together now for the Kreisel, but this could turn red pretty quickly. You'll see that split coming up in 3 seconds. And no, they do. They open it up. So they had the speed working, and perhaps the correction helped them out. The Slovakian doubles team of Tomáš Verčák, Maciej Žmiš, now 34 hundredths up. So they'll have to make a big mistake to lose that lead, and they don't. They just hit that paddle nicely at 2:11.25. So an advantage of 0.406 over Ukraine. Slovakia moves into the lead. They will have at least a top 6 in today's race, and with some help from one of the next few nations, they could repeat their string of 5th place finishes dating back to last season. All right, as I often say in these relay events, you have 2 competitions going on, the smaller nations and the larger nations. Barring any disqualifications, Slovakia has won the race of the smaller nations, but now we get ready for Austria, followed by Latvia, Italy, Russia, and Germany. And those are the teams that had the top 5 positions last year in the World Cup overall. So it will be interesting. If you consider the results over the 3 races that have already happened here in Eagles this weekend, this figures to be a battle between Austria going now and Germany, who will be the last to go, because they had the most consistent top 5 showings, top 5s from everyone. Madeline Egler will be first to go. She finished 5th. She'll be followed by Jonas Müller. He finished 5th yesterday in men's singles. And of course, Tomáš Stoy and Lorenz Kola won the doubles race. Egler, as I mentioned earlier today, had a shoulder injury earlier this summer. Considered having surgery on that injury. Did not, but she's still on the mend. And she is traditionally one of the fastest up at the top of the track. She looked really good today. She was in 3rd place after the first run before dropping back 2 spots. And this Austrian team, not all of these athletes, but Austria as a nation did end up on the podium at the Olympic Games in Pyeongchang in team relay. It was Gleicher and Pence Fischler along with Madeline Egler. Hitting that paddle a good 1/4 of a second up on the competition. Now Jonas Müller. Müller was also on the podium after 1 run before dropping back into 5th place after the 2nd heat yesterday in the World Cup opener on his home track. But Müller had a couple of victories last year on the World Cup, including here in Eagles. He had a 2nd place finish at the World Championships. He's become one of the steadier sliders in the sport. Making his way to the finish, he'll hit the paddle with a huge advantage over Slovakia. Did I mention these were 2 races in 1? The smaller nations and the larger nations? Yes, so Austria now on course. Choi and Kohler. Now, if they can be very, very strong here, they will not only extend the lead over Slovakia, they could really make it a challenge for the Latvians, Italians, and Russians to follow. Wow, they just come off curve 9 as if they own it, which in effect they do. This is the home track for the Austrians, Tomáš Choi and Lorenz Kola. To the finish. How big will this advantage be? Gigantic, 1.478. So as a point of comparison, only 0.5, a half a second, separate places 2 through 4, but 1.5 seconds separates 1, Austria, from 2. Good job. We'll see how long that holds. I got to believe they will be in that leader area for a while, at least until the Russians. I don't know, the Italians could surprise today as well. Austria putting on a good show here on their home track in Eagles. The only thing missing are the thousands of Luge spectators and fans to cheer on their team as they would have done to victory yesterday in doubles. And we're also going to be missing this great medal ceremony they usually have after every race day down near the outrun, near the timing building. But the anthem will be playing somewhere. Austria out in front, 4 nations now still to come. Renny Friedel, the coach of Austria, his work is done, at least for this race, but now Latvia. Waiting, the young doubles team and Christoph Aspriols, but it's his sister Candia getting ready. Aparioda. Good season last year in the World Cup for Latvia in team relay as they were second at the World Championships. They were 4th in the World Cup overall. No victories, but 3 podiums on the World Cup to go along with that world silver. Candia, a rare out of the top 10 performance earlier today, 11th place in the race. But she came oh so close to a podium last year at the World Championships. She had the silver in the relay, but she had a 4th in the women's singles competition. Candia Aparioda hits and allows the gate open for her brother, Christers Apariods. 8th place yesterday in the World Cup opener, 10th last year in the World Cup overall, and an equally impressive 5th place finish at the World Championships. I've been saying this for a couple of years now. Will this be the breakout season for this big, strong Latvian? Okay, 0.03 of a second up. They may stay in the green, but I got to believe Christers needs to open up that lead quite a bit more for the doubles team to hold off Austria. And it's only 0.005 of a second. The good news for this team on ice now, Bots and Pluma, they had a spectacular World Cup debut yesterday with a 5th place showing after the first run. They fell back to 8th, but still a top 10. The bad news, they're racing against an Austrian team that owns this track. So just like that, they're in the red. It's only 0.004 of a second, but that figures to increase that deficit now on the lower part of the track. Still, they look very good, and this may be a new formidable doubles team from Latvia. Loving what I'm seeing from these guys. They lose a lot of that advantage down below, about 1/4 of a second, but they kept it tighter than some people may have thought. 2nd place right now for Latvia, behind Austria. I don't have all of the splits for each individual sled here, but I'd be interested to know. I guess they were within about 1/4 of a second of Austria there in doubles. So that's great for this young Latvian team against Stoy and Kola. Okay, still ahead, we have Russia and Germany. The Italians will be up next. For the time being, Austria stays in the lead. Nice job by the brother-sister combination to go along with the doubles team. Latvia currently in second place. They finished fourth last year in the World Cup overall, top 5 in every race. Now the next two races, or the next two teams rather, are the two who tied for the World Cup overall title. Italy and Russia each had 431 points. And Italy could have won that World Cup overall had it not been for a 10th place finish in the final race. On course right now for Team Italy, Andrea Fetta, 9th place earlier today in the World Cup race. Aside from tying for first in the World Cup overall last year, Italy was 4th at the World Championships. They won the opening World Cup relay last year. That was staged in Whistler, British Columbia, Canada, where this year's World Championships were scheduled to take place. Actually, originally scheduled for Calgary, moved to Whistler, and now in Königssee, and it looks as if Andrea Vetter has missed the paddle. Oh, in what I called one of the easier locations, but it is just not that easy to do, even if it's an uphill straightaway. The core muscles and precision needed to get off of that sled and reach up and hit the paddle is not that easy. And you got to feel badly for Dominic Fischnaller, who was getting ready to go next, for Rita Rassner, who had the opportunity to compete in the doubles here. They haven't had a lot of relay chances the last few years, but you have to feel most worstly, is that a word? Can't be, for Andrea Vetter. Just feel badly for her. Italy disqualified. We'll get another look at this in a moment. So again, it's a long straightaway. It's uphill. It's not that wide, but timing is everything. And as I mentioned, because the athletes have said this to me, I mean, consider you're on the floor doing sit-ups. It's tough enough to get off and get that upper body up. Now consider you're doing it on a sled that's still going 55, 60 miles per hour. And it is a challenge. Italy down, Austria in front, and two nations remain. They'll have a little extra time here. It's Ekaterina Katnikova, the world champion. She'll be the first to go, but they're not going to mess with the timing just because Italy's run was cut short, because preparation means everything. Does give us a little time to just talk about how great they've done here in Eagles. This is such a wonderful location in the valley of the Südtyrolean, or the Tyrolean Alps. Along with St. Moritz, Switzerland, and Lake Placid, USA, Innsbruck is one of 3 communities to host 2 different Olympic Games. And Cortina is kind of going to do that in 2026, because that's where the sliding sports events will be held, at the site of the 1956 Olympic Games. Now we get ready for the Russian Federation. They tied with Italy for the overall World Cup title last year. They had 2 victories on the World Cup, Altenburg and Winterberg. In fact, Russia was the only nation to have more than 1 win. Actually, Russia and Germany each had a pair of victories. But Russia had its major disappointment at the World Championship on its own track. It was this woman, Katnikova. She had the 2 World Cup titles, or World Championship titles, earlier in the week in the sprint and women's singles. But Katnikova missed the paddle in the team relay competition, just as we saw Andrea Fetta do. So the best of times and the worst of times for Ekaterina Katnikova last year in Sochi. 4 thousandths of a second her advantage right now over Madeleine Egla and the Austrians, and now she falls a bit behind. She had a good race earlier today where she finished in 4th, just ahead of Egla. It's so close now, that clock is neither green nor red. What will it be when she hits the paddle? It's green. So she made up a lot of time down at the bottom, 1500ths to be exact. And now on course, Zeman Pavlichenko. Pavlichenko was 9th yesterday in the World Cup race. Last year overall, 3rd in the World Cup standings. The 2015 world champion, opening up the lead to nearly 0.2 of a second over Austria and Jonas Müller. Staying about the same, losing just the slightest amount of time. How close will this be? Advantage Austria for the doubles, so we'll see what they have to work with here for the Russian team. Kashkin and Korshunov, they were 9th yesterday. 1900ths up right now on Austria. But Stoy and Kola were sensational a few moments ago. Now it's just down to 400ths. I gotta believe that Austria will hang tight down at the bottom. In fact, a little bit of a rough exit of curve 9 for the Russians. Can they hang on to a top 2? That's the best they can hope for at this point, as you see they've gotten into the red. It's Russia against Austria, with Germans still set to come. And they hit it, and they are 900ths back. Not a bad recovery down there at the bottom for Kashkin and Korshunov, but Stoy and Kola of Austria were just that much better. So Austria is guaranteed no worse than second. With the showing Russia just put down, they will also be on the podium. They can be no worse than 3rd. It's Austria, Russia, and Latvia, the top 3 right now, with just 1 sled remaining. Actually, 3 sleds from 1 nation, and those are the Germans. Good consistency all around by Katnikova and Pavlichenko, world champions both. And the doubles team held their own. Kashkin and Korshunov. Again, I don't have all stats in front of me, but I got to believe that was the 2nd fastest of the doubles teams this afternoon. Austria won 1 race last year, Germany won 2. But for the first time in the history of this relay competition, Germany did not capture the overall World Cup title. And that was in part because they boycotted the race in Winterberg, so they did not compete in every race and ended up only 16 points out of the overall lead. So, come on, let's face it, they probably would have taken a 10th consecutive title had they raced in Winterberg. But that was then, this is now. They looked very good in the 3 World Cup races, including this woman, Julia Tobitz, who earlier today won the World Cup opener over her teammate, Natalie Geisenberger. Last year, as I mentioned, Germany 3rd in the World Cup overall in team relay, 1st at the World Championships. Tobitz will be followed by Felix Loch, and then the doubles team of Egert Beneken. All things considered, they are the favorites here, not just because they carry the name Germany, but their performances over the weekend. 1st, and 3rd for the 3 athletes, compared to Austria, 5th, and 1st. It's all about hitting that paddle now for Julia Tobitz, as the Saxonian comes across the finish, hitting the paddle with a gigantic advantage. 1/4 of a second now for Felix Loch. Loch does nicely there on a start curve that he has not trained or raced at this week, perhaps 1 training run. The Bavarian finally broke a long slump by getting back onto the top of the podium yesterday in the World Cup opener. A 3-time Olympic gold medalist, twice in singles, once in team relay. Felix Loch yesterday captured his 40th career World Cup victory. He's keeping it basically steady with Jonas Mueller right now. Perhaps lost a little time on the advantage. That was almost exactly the same as the Austrians. So can Egert Bennekin stay out in front? Yesterday they finished third behind the Austrians. This could be tight. Egert and Bennekin have been struggling a little bit. I heard one athlete tell me they just didn't look too comfortable on the sled yesterday, which was uncharacteristic. They both had COVID over the summer, but they've more than recovered from that. Sasha has had an injury to his neck as well. This is going to be very tight for the gold medal. Germany against Austria, now just 900ths of a second. Will they run out of track? Will they hang on? They do by 300ths of a second. So as billed, this race between Germany and Austria was as tight as we thought. In the end, the Germans hang on by just 300ths of a second as Egert and Bennekin do everything they can to keep Germany in the green. It's Germany over Austria and Russia. They were the top three nations last year in the World Cup, and they open up this new season as the podium nations. Well, Tobitz opened up a big lead. That was the story there. She did her job against Egla. Felix stayed even with Jonas Mueller of Austria. You can say he did his job as well. The toughest job was perhaps for Bennekin and Egert, as they had to really keep out in front of an Austrian doubles team, which was about as sizzling as anyone all weekend on this track, as perfect. They did it. They were working off of a quarter of a second advantage, and they needed just about every last tenth. There's George Hackel, our first look at the Bavarian coach, celebrating a Team Germany victory. Germany has now captured men's singles, women's singles, and team relay, with still the sprint competitions to come in Innsbruck, Austria. Final results, look how close it is. Times of 2 minutes, 9 seconds, and when it's all said and done, only 300ths of a second separate first from second. Russia and Latvia third and fourth with the Italian disqualification. Slovakia has its third consecutive World Cup fifth place finish. Ukraine, Romania, Korea, and Czech Republic, the 9 finishing nations